One of the most powerful things you can ever do after a breakup, especially when it feels like you gave everything and got crumbs in return, is to stop talking. Not out of spite, not to punish, not even as some calculated move to get him back. And if because peace becomes more important than proving a point, there's something incredibly powerful that happens when you no longer feel the need to explain yourself, justify your pain, or chase after closure that was never really being offered to you in the first place. I've seen it time and time again. Someone pours their heart out, trying to be heard, trying to be understood, trying to show how much they care, and yet it falls on deaf ears. But the moment they stop, if you continue, the moment they take a breath and choose peace over proving something, that's when the silence starts to echo. And if you continue, that's when notice. We sometimes underestimate just how loud our absence can be. Continue when you're no longer available for the same conversations, when you stop texting to check in, when you stop reacting, when your energy pulls back. Not as a tactic, and if you continue, but because you've genuinely decided that your well-being matters more. That's when the dynamic changes, because suddenly he's not getting the emotional response he was used to. The attention, the updates, if you continue, the effort, it's all gone. And not because you're trying to teach him a lesson, if you continue, but because you finally realize that your peace can't live in the same place as that confusion anymore. And if you continue, there's a kind of strength in quiet detachment that's deeply unsettling to someone who took your presence for granted. If you continue, it's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's just calm. And that calm can be piercing when you no longer flinch at his name. And if you continue, when your mood doesn't rise and fall based on his texts. And if you continue, when you're not performing pain for anyone to see, that's when it becomes real. That's when the shift becomes visible. If you continue, even if you're not broadcasting it, you see, men often don't process the loss when you cry, or when you beg, or when you're fighting for them to see your worth. Those moments, though raw and honest, are usually seen as expected. If you continue, they're used to that. What they don't expect is silence, emotional stillness. If you continue, that's when it starts to dawn on them that something has changed, that the energy they were so used to, your attention, your care, your constant emotional availability, it's no longer there, and they feel it. If you continue, not because you wanted them to feel it, but because you finally let go, it's in that space, in that calm, if you continue, where he finally begins to notice what he didn't value when he had it. Because your silence speaks the truth. One that says, I'm no longer trying to convince you. I've accepted the reality, and if you continue, and I'm moving forward, you're not posting cryptic quotes to get a reaction, and you're not pretending to be happy to make him jealous. You're just done, at peace. And that's what shakes him. If you continue, not the noise, not the chaos, but the quiet. And here's the thing, when you move on in peace, if you continue, you're not waiting for him to notice. That's the paradox. You're not doing it for him. You're doing it for you. And if you continue, but it's in that moment, when you no longer need to be seen, that he finally looks. If you continue, there's this idea that sometimes floats around, this notion that moving on is a strategy. And it continue, that if you just act like you've let go, if you play it cool enough, distant enough, and if you continue, maybe he'll miss you and come running back. But let's be honest, that's not really moving on. That's performance. And if you continue, that's pain wearing a mask. And people can feel the difference, even if they don't know how to name it. True moving on isn't a tactic, And if you continue, it's not about manipulating a reaction or trying to win some unspoken battle of who cares less. And if you continue, it's not cold or calculating. It's about reclaiming your power. It's about growth. It's waking up one day and realizing that your life has to be about more than the story you were trying to write with someone who didn't want to hold the pen with you. If you continue, and that moment when you choose to turn the page, not because you want to provoke him, and if you continue, but because you genuinely want a better chapter for yourself, that's the real move. Continue. That's when everything begins to shift. You don't wake up healed. You don't just snap your fingers and forget, but you do start choosing differently. You start showing up for yourself. You stop checking his social media. And if you continue, you stop crafting text in your head that you'll never send. You stop wondering what he's thinking and start asking what you want. It's subtle at first. Small, consistent choices. But those choices add up to transformation. And here's the wild part, when it's real, when the moving on is authentic and rooted in actual growth. That's when he often starts to notice. And if you continue, because the energy has changed, you're no longer orbiting around him. You're no longer trying to make him see your worth. If you continue, you're building a life where his validation simply isn't required anymore. And that's attractive, not because you're trying to be, but because you're free. See, and if you continue, people can sense when you're still emotionally tethered to them. When every post, every outfit, and if you continue, every laugh is just a little too curated. But when it stops being about them altogether, and if you continue, when you truly shift the spotlight back onto yourself, that's when something in them clicks. It's not because you were playing a clever game. It's because you weren't playing at all. Think about that. And if you continue, the moment you stop moving based on what he might see or feel, and start moving based on what you need, that's the moment you actually begin to heal. And healing is magnetic. If you continue, is magnetic. A woman who knows who she is, who's not trying to fit herself into someone else's version of love, it continue is powerful beyond words. She doesn't have to chase. She doesn't have to convince. Her life speaks for itself. And if he notices, fine. If he doesn't, also fine. Because the point was never about him in the first place. If you continue, the point was that you chose you, that you rose from something that once felt like it would break you, and instead let it shape you into someone stronger, wiser, more grounded. It's not that he never cared. If you continue, it's that he didn't expect you to grow. He thought you'd wait. He thought you'd always be emotionally available if you continue, even if he wasn't. But when you stopped performing heartbreak and started living your peace, and if you continue, that's when he saw it, maybe for the first time, and by then you were already gone. If you continue, there's something deeply magnetic about a person who's at peace. Not pretending, not forcing positivity, not trying to impress, but someone who's just genuinely at ease with themselves. And after a breakup, and if you continue, when the noise settles and you're no longer reacting to every little thing, that kind of peace becomes your superpower. It's subtle, but undeniable, because in a world full of people trying to prove, compete, and constantly show how okay they are, someone who just is, who's calm, grounded, and not seeking outside validation, stands out in the most unexpected way. When you're in pain, your energy is often scattered. And if you continue, you might find yourself doing things you wouldn't normally do. Posting things to look unbothered, saying things to provoke a response, or over-explaining your side of the story. And you don't do it because you're weak. And if you continue, you do it because you're hurting and you want to be seen. You want to feel like you matter, especially to the one who made you question it. But the more you try to prove you've moved on, if you continue, the less peace you actually feel. It's like your healing becomes a performance instead of a reality. If you continue, now contrast that with someone who has stopped all of that. She's not showing off her glow up for anyone but herself. If you continue, she's not in a hurry to be seen because she's finally started seeing herself. If you continue, she's not trying to be noticed because she's genuinely content with her own attention. And ironically, if you continue, that's when people start to take notice. That's when he starts to take notice. And if you continue, because the woman he remembers might have been emotionally reactive, always available, always reaching out. If you continue, always showing she cared, even when it wasn't reciprocated. But now, there's a stillness to her. If you continue, she's no longer picking up the rope to tug on a relationship that already fell apart. That peace, it's rare. And if you continue, and it's powerful, it sends a message without needing to say anything at all. I'm good. I'm no longer waiting. If you continue, I've stopped tying my happiness to you. He doesn't feel your absence because you yelled and slammed the door. If you continue, he feels it because the energy that once surrounded him, your worry, your texts, your emotional availability, is just gone. And it didn't leave with a bang. It dissolved quietly, without permission, if you continue, without warning. And that's unsettling, because peace isn't what most people expect after they've hurt someone. They expect anger, chaos, tears. But when you respond with peace, it catches them off guard. It makes them pause. If you continue, and that pause, that's when the noticing begins. It's not even about looking happy. It's about being whole. If you continue, you can't fake that kind of peace. You can't replicate it with filters or pretend with long captions. If you continue, it comes from having gone through the fire and realizing you don't need to carry the weight anymore. It's from no longer needing to explain yourself, from no longer basing your worth on whether or not someone comes back. And if you continue, and when he finally sees you, truly sees you, it's not because you made him, it's because you let go. And that peace you found, that quiet confidence, that wholeness, it does what no angry message or perfect outfit ever could. If you continue, it makes him realize what he lost, not because you were loud about it, but because you were finally silent. Peace speaks volumes, and when it does, people listen. If you continue, there's something that happens when you emotionally detach, not because you're pretending. And if continue, not because you're trying to trigger a response. And if you continue, but because you've genuinely reached a place where you're done holding onto someone who wouldn't hold you back. That detachment, it changes everything, not just for you, but for him too. Because as long as you're emotionally tethered, if he can still feel it, even if you're not texting, even if you're saying all the right things about moving on, and if you continue, that emotional thread still keeps you connected, and he knows it's there. If you continue, he feels it in the background, your energy still revolving around him, even in silence. But when that thread finally snaps, when you pull your energy back fully and stop engaging mentally, emotionally, spiritually, something shifts. You go quiet, not just externally, but internally. You're no longer waiting, watching, hoping. And that stillness, that true detachment, and if you create something he's not ready for, curiosity, because before he could predict you. He knew you'd reach out at some point. He knew you'd show up in his notifications in some way. Liking something, replying to a story, sending that one just checking in message. But now there's nothing, no signal, no sign, just space. And that space becomes louder than any message you could have sent. It gets in his head. He starts to wonder why. You continue. Why aren't you reacting? Why aren't you trying anymore? Has someone else stepped in? Have you moved on completely? Does he still have a place in your life at all? And let's be honest, he might not have even realized how much he depended on that thread until it was gone. And if you continue, sometimes people don't recognize what your presence did for them until your absence replaces it. If you continue, your emotional availability was something he leaned on, whether he admitted it or not. It gave him comfort. It gave him control. It gave him attention. But now that current has stopped flowing, and he's left wondering what changed. But nothing changed overnight. You just got tired. You stopped trying to decode mixed signals. You stopped making excuses. If you continue, you stopped asking why he couldn't just choose you with clarity and certainty. You stopped hoping for the version of him that only existed in your mind, the one he never consistently showed up as. Continue. That detachment didn't come from a place of bitterness. It came from clarity, from finally understanding that holding on was hurting more than letting go. And in that detachment, you reclaimed your power. And if you continue, you took back all the energy you were pouring into someone else's potential and started pouring it into your own peace. That decision, it didn't need to be shouted. It just needed to be felt. And he felt it. Whether he shows it or not, whether he reaches out or stays silent, I promise you, he noticed. Because emotional detachment doesn't go unnoticed. It changes the entire dynamic. It leaves a space where you used to be. And in that space, he starts asking questions. And if you continue, not just about you, but about himself, about what he let go of with ever fully appreciating. If you continue, you didn't have to slam a door. You didn't have to make a scene. You just left with your silence, your growth. If you continue, your absence. And in doing so, you became the question he never thought he'd have to ask. There's a moment after heartbreak when you get exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. You're tired of trying to prove you were enough, tired of waiting for a text that never comes. Tired of wondering what you did wrong when deep down, you know you gave everything you had. And in that moment, something inside you shifts. Because eventually the energy you used to spend trying to be seen by him starts to turn inward. You stop begging for validation from someone who couldn't even show up consistently, and you begin, maybe for the first time, to see yourself more clearly. You start to realize that the worth you were trying to get from him was always supposed to come from you. Has been that the validation you chased through his attention, his compliments, his approval, none of that could ever replace the deeper recognition you had to give yourself. And it's strange because in the beginning, that idea feels foreign. You don't feel powerful, you feel broken. But slowly, when you begin to listen to yourself again, to honor your own feelings instead of suppressing them, to show yourself compassion instead of criticism, things begin to change. You stop fighting to earn love from someone else, and you start becoming the kind of person you can love deeply. That shift, that inner glow, doesn't happen all at once. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, it's personal, and it's powerful. Because suddenly, you're not performing for anyone. You're not dressing a certain way or saying the right things to spark interest. You're just showing up as yourself, authentically, unapologetically. And that energy is magnetic, not because it's designed to be, but because it's rare. People are drawn to those who are rooted in self-respect. Once the apology, it's not arrogance. It's not about thinking you're better than anyone else. The apology, it's about knowing that you're enough without needing someone else to validate it. And when you walk through the world with that mindset, everything shifts. Especially how others see you, including him. Because when he knew you before, your energy was directed at him. You were trying, giving, chasing, hoping. But now, your energy is back where it belongs. On you. And that changes the way you move, the way you talk, the way you carry yourself. There's no needness, no tension, just presence. And that presence, grounded, calm, confident, is often what makes him look back. Not because you're trying to be noticed, but because you're finally okay without being noticed. It's ironic, right? The second you stop needing to be seen is often the exact moment when someone starts to truly see you. But the beauty of that moment is that it no longer matters in the same way. Because when you're no longer desperate to be chosen, you become the chooser. You can still care. You can still look back with love. But you don't wait anymore. You don't wonder if he'll finally come around. You've filled the space that was once empty with your own presence. Apology has been. And that light, your own light, is what you finally see. You're not seeking love that only shows up when it's convenient. You're cultivating love that's consistent, whole, and already within you. And once that happens, you stop walking into rooms hoping he'll notice you. Has been. You walk in already knowing that you notice you. And that's more than enough. One of the most freeing realizations you'll ever have is that closure doesn't come from someone else. It comes from you. And I know how hard that is to accept, especially when all you want is for him to acknowledge the pain he caused, to apologize, has been, to explain why he couldn't show up for you the way you needed. You wait, hoping that one day he'll send that message or say the words that finally make it all make sense. But the truth is, for most people, that day never comes, not the way you hoped. And even if it did, it probably still wouldn't be enough, because what we're really craving in those moments isn't just clarity. We're craving validation. We want to know we weren't crazy, that we mattered, that our love wasn't wasted. We want to feel seen. But here's the thing, waiting for someone who hurt you to give you peace is like standing in the rain, hoping the storm will apologize. It won't. And if you're not careful, you end up handing your healing over to someone who didn't even know to handle your heart in the first place. Apology has been. The closure you're looking for doesn't come through words. It comes through acceptance. It's the moment you stop needing the story to have a perfect ending. It's when you stop needing him to understand your side, because you finally understand your own worth without his recognition of it. You stop playing back every conversation, every message, every red flag you tried to paint over with hope. You start realizing that his inability to love you the way you needed says more about where he was in life than about your value. And when you finally make peace with the fact that he may never fully understand what he lost, that's when you win. That's when your heart starts to let go. Not because you got the answers you were chasing, but because you stopped needing them. Apology has been. You've outgrown the version of yourself that would have waited around hoping he'd come back just to say he's sorry. Has been. You've stepped into the version of you that doesn't need him to look back in order to move forward. And here's the beautiful part. When you reach that place, when you stop hoping for his realization and start living in your own, that's usually the exact moment when he starts to feel the loss. Because now, there's no emotional hook left, no unfinished conversation, no crack in the door. You've closed it, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity and grace. And that kind of closure, it's undeniable. He may come back eventually. Maybe he'll realize what he had when it's already too late. Maybe he'll try to reopen that door. But by then, once there has been, you'll be so grounded in your peace that it won't rattle you. Because closure didn't come from his return. It came from your release, from your decision to stop chasing apologies and start choosing freedom, from your choice to write a new story that doesn't need him in it to be meaningful. The day you no longer wait for his understanding is the day you finally understand yourself. And that's the only closure you ever really needed.